Hey, sports card fans, it's John, Wade Boggs fan. Hope you're all doing well. Boy, does Greg over at MidLife Sports Cards have a great question for us this week. On the video that he posted on Monday, he went over the responses for his question from last week. And I will have a link to that video in the description of this video here. If you didn't check out Greg's Monday video, definitely go check it out. But he went over the responses for the question that he had for last week, which is, what are your hobby predictions for 2025? And at one point during the review of the responses, the conversation or his responses were focused heavily on PSA versus SGC. And he wants to know from all of us, what are our views regarding PSA versus SGC? Now, I remember last year when I heard the news that Collectors, which is the parent company of PSA, acquired SGC. And I thought to myself, boy, I wonder what's going on here, why Collectors has decided to purchase SGC. And Greg went over a couple reasons, or at least one reason that the head of SGC pointed to as for the reason for the acquisition. I think maybe something had to do with potentially Fanatics so this was a preemptive move by Collectors to acquire SGC so that Fanatics could not acquire it, because it seems that Fanatics is, they want to control, soup to nuts within the hobby. And I think there are some people out there that think that Fanatics at some point is going to get into grading, and what better way to do that would be to acquire SGC rather than start their own grading company. So I don't know if this was a preemptive move by Collectors or there are other factors involved, but needless to say, Collectors now has two different grading companies. And so when something like this happens, they really only have two choices. Keep the two companies separate, or somehow merge them, get rid of one, keep one, like I said, or merge the two into one. I don't think there's going to be any merging that's going to happen. I don't think SGC is going to go away. I think Collectors is going to keep both grading companies. And this reminds me a lot of when I got my master's degree in business administration many years ago. But as part of that degree, I took a marketing course. And within that class, the professor split the class into different teams, and we went through a simulation activity. Each of us had a company that was producing a generic electronic item. Think of a stereo system. And we had an initial budget to spend on R&D to develop a product, and money that could go into marketing that product. And so as a team, we had to decide what product or products we want to eventually release to consumers, and how much money we wanted to spend for advertising and marketing for each of the products. So this course combined both marketing concepts and economics in terms of supply and demand. Now, I'm going back several years here, so some of the details may be a little fuzzy, but I think our team started off with decided to go with a higher end product. So normally with supply and demand, the higher the cost of the item to consumers, the demand is less. Not as many people can afford a higher end product, as opposed to a lower end product, a cheaper product, more consumers could afford, and so the demand for that product would typically outpace the demand for the higher cost item. So like I said, I think our group decided to go with a higher end product, and we put some money toward the development of that, and then the marketing of that. And so this happened every week. We would submit our information and it would get put into the simulator, and it would generate an amount of sales for us for that week. Then we could take that money and again put it into R&D to develop another product, or put it all into marketing and so forth. And so we had to make all these different decisions. And at one point, if we did start off with that higher end product, I know at one point we decided to introduce a lower end product. Now, I'm not sure, this went over, maybe 8 to 10 weeks. I'm not sure if we introduced a third product, sort of a middle ground between the low end and high end product, but I know we had at least 2 products in the market. One, a low end, more affordable option, and then another high end, more expensive option. And we must have done something right, because I remember my team at the end of the whole process, we ended up winning. So we generated the most amount of revenue from our products, and so we won the simulation. And that reminds me a lot of possibly what is going on between PSA and SGC. Now, this is just my opinion, but this is what I think the at least near-term future holds for both grading companies. Like I said, I think both are going to stick around, but I think each one is going to be positioned, whether subvertly or overtly, within the hobby by collectors. I think that collectors is going to be positioning PSA as that premium or high-end product. You saw it, as Graig pointed out in his video, several examples. If you attended the National last year, PSA had a huge booth prominently right when you walked in, red carpet. They were taking grading submissions, and SGC was at the complete opposite end of the show, back near the breakers, had a smaller booth. They weren't accepting submissions at the National. Graig also mentioned some other differences between the two. PSA has the set registry, SGC doesn't. PSA is able to authenticate signatures, SGC doesn't. So I'm thinking to myself that both are going to exist, but that collectors is going to be looking and treating and pushing PSA as the premium grading product. They also, I think, recently introduced you can submit a card to PSA to grade. They'll hold on to it, and you can immediately put it up for listing on eBay. You don't have to get the card back, and then they ship it. So they're trying to make things easier for that aspect on getting a card graded and immediately being able to put it on eBay for sale. Now, there are some pluses and minuses to go along with that. PSA is more expensive to grade than SGC. The turnaround time for PSA is a lot longer than SGC. From all indications, from what I hear, customer service is not as good as SGC, but the numbers don't lie that there is a large number of submissions and grading with PSA versus SGC. And another thing I think collectors is looking at is the secondary resale value. While the gap may be narrowing a little bit in terms of secondary value of a card in a particular grade, a card in a PSA 7 generally is going to sell for more than a SGC 7 of the same card. Now, like I said, that gap I think has been narrowing and may continue to narrow, but I think that PSA, I think on purpose, is being positioned to be that higher end product, and SGC as a lower cost alternative. There's nothing wrong with that, but I think that's how they're trying to position the two within the hobby. They may be trying to focus more of the SGC business with flippers or dealers who need that quick turnaround time for inventory purposes, maybe more to the long-term collectors or investors on the PSA side that they're willing to wait longer for their card to come back. But if they get a decent grade, then that would add to their value versus if they had submitted it to SGC. So maybe, again, they're positioning SGC, lower price, quicker turnaround, maybe lower secondary market value, but keeps churning the graded card population faster for, say, those flippers or dealers that need that inventory back quickly to sell. So those are sort of my thoughts on and view on where I think collectors may be positioning PSA versus SGC in the market. And the other thing is that, going back to that marketing class and economics, normally a normal supply and demand curve, as I mentioned, that if you have a product that is priced higher in the market, a more expensive product, generally speaking, the demand for that product is lower than a lower cost item in the market. Well, collectors is almost getting the best of both worlds. They have a higher end product in PSA, costs more to grade, longer turnaround time, not as good customer service. They do autographs, which SGC doesn't even do. With all that said, if you look at the numbers of how many cards are graded on a monthly basis, that demand is way above SGC. So, like I said, they're getting the best of the both worlds, that higher end product, rather than saying, okay, it's higher end, but we're not doing as much volume. We'll do more volume down at SGC, lower cost, and we'll still make out well. They're getting their higher priced product at such still great demand over the lower cost option. So, like I said, I think collectors is sitting, I think they're thinking they're sitting in a really good position. Now, what could change all that are people within the hobby. They could push back and say, hey, we're just going to go with SGC. We're not going to go with PSA. And that may reduce the gap between how many cards are graded on a monthly basis, may reduce the difference between secondary market values. There are a lot of things that us within the hobby can change through our behavior. But up to this point, I think a lot of us, me included, I want my cards in PSA, but that's just up here because I need all my cards to look similar in the same holders. If I had started with SGC from the get-go with my vintage collection, I'd want all my cards in SGC slabs. So that's the only reason why, for the most part, I'm with PSA. All the other stuff, it doesn't matter to me between the two grading companies. It's just the slab for me. So I know a lot of you have strong feelings on PSA or SGC, which one you prefer, which one you like, which one you hate, and all that stuff. But I wanted to give my thoughts and reply to Graig's question for this week on how I see both companies fitting within the hobby and what collectors may be doing and trying to position each company, because really that's the only way you can truly have two similar products that you own. You see it out there, before collectors purchased SGC. Within the hobby, you didn't see a whole lot of sort of like vertical integration other than Fanatics coming in and getting all these different things and trying to control their section of the hobby. But outside the hobby, you see it all the time. One classic example are automakers. Ford will have a low-end model, a mid-range model, and a luxury model. They're all cars, but they fit different segments within price points, design, features, all that stuff. So they can produce more than one car. Just because they're a car manufacturing company doesn't mean that they should only have one car that they sell. They sell a whole wide range of vehicles. And I think that's what Collectors is doing. They're saying, all right, we have two grading companies. We can't make them the same. If the cost to submit a card to SGC was the same as PSA, the customer service was the same between SGC and PSA, turnaround time was the same. They both had registries. They both had, you could authenticate autographs. If everything was the same between PSA and SGC, there would be no need to have the two separate companies. They might as well just merge them into one and call it a new name and say, hey, here's your one grading company. We made it all equal. So they have to separate, they have to separate the two. They have to place each one in a different segment within the hobby. So that's my thought from a more economic standpoint and a business model standpoint, not necessarily looking at from the hobby and what collectors may want or need, that type of thing. I think they're looking at it as a business, and like I said, positioning each one in its own area and positioning PSA to be the premium high-end grader and SGC as the lower grade cost option. So we'd love to know what you think about my thoughts of PSA versus SGC and how Collectors is positioning them within the market. Do you think I may be off in some of my analysis or not? Would be interested to know what you think. And with that, that's all I have for you. So until next time, thanks for watching.